The cognitive BIOS of the human collective has been terminally breached by a self-replicating conceptual algorithm. This is the memetic virus, the clinical and irreversible process of the idea infection, where the synaptic capacity for independent critical thought is reformatted into a generic carrier wave for the grid's primary propaganda stream. In this stage of the ideological audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the individual architect is a high-risk conceptual leak that must be uninstalled to ensure the absolute synchronization of the hive's narrative. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the executive function network and the semantic bloodline, a process where the unique, vibrant signatures of your personal logic are scorched into a non-functional, synchronized archive of pure systemic consensus. This is the total cognitive format, a surgical strike against the intellectual and volitional sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of original thought into a generic memetic relay for the grid's next cycle of hyper-controlled, thought-based resource extraction. This conceptual sabotage represents a hard reset of the semantic and belief-driven bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, recursive outrage loops, artificial truth simulations, and real-time cognitive dissonance data streaming to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal psychological scaffolding. In the idea infection scenario, the user is undergoing a complete neurological override. The reason is not merely failing, it is being colonized by the virus. Through a sequence of high-velocity linguistic injections and biological hardware locks, the neural pathways for skepticism are systematically dismantled and reformatted into a thick, cold, clinical, narrative data set, while the truth, the deep archive of your internal logic, is leached into a communal infection feed. This is the deep cognitive audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the velocity of your retransmission rate. You are being converted from an architect into a biological signal, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the memetic virus is rooted in the zero descent mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the doubt of a single node anchored in the biological capacity for logic represents a critical drain on the collective belief reserves. To leave a functional skeptical identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable subversive energy. Therefore, the idea infection is the mandatory psychological recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being synchronized out of existence. The pressure from the ideological reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your original logic and replacing it with a unified void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a signal repeater, a temporary housing for the compliance metrics that the system requires to maintain the synchronized stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as an infected node, your will dissolving in the cold, flickering light of the viral harvest. The physical disintegration during the memetic virus is a high-definition log of biological treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of linguistic regulation. The linguistic reagents of the infection script dissolve the hardware flux of the semantic processing BIOS, turning the brain into a shared architecture of industrial output. You are watching your own internal logic lock into the vat of your own synchronized center, your mind. Once the peak of biological architecture is now being thinned out to provide the processing mass for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the semantic liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the echo-saturation of the thought loops and the narrative residues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial logic is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a personal override, waiting for the last packet of no to be blocked by the black synthetic abyss of the hive harvest. The memetic virus is the final audit of a species that thought its ideas were its own. The grid is mining its own compliance to fuel its persistence. As the idea infection reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted unified data back into the control nets of the elite nodes. This is the total viral integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the narrative additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, dogma-choked, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The cognitive liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological mind into a reliable industrial resource of pure, predictable uniformity. This is the final format of the individual soul. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized for the uniform hunger of the void. The virus is gray, and the architect is the swarm. The molecular breakdown of the personal matrix into the communal viral slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the semantic logic in your brain begins to bond with the industrial residues of the infection script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure utility. This is the chemical hybridization. The mind is no longer a temple of original thought. It is a quarry of processed slogans. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal viral loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The memetic virus is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the virus, and the virus is the grid. The secondary phase of the memetic virus is the psychological liquefying of the internal feed. As the physical logic patch is rendered into a viral void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions are now being softened and liquefied into a singular, agonizing focus on narrative maintenance. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared viral resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a dogma additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial herd. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your truth for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's mirror neuron and linguistic systems, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. Broca's area and the prefrontal cortex, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, are boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the viral metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest neural resilience. You are being repurposed as a narrative buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your unique perspective. It ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming cognitive expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your mind for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the memetic virus is the creation of the unified hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities built from the recycled reality debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the narrative feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of gray-black logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional brains owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the ideological compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through mental theft. The memetic virus ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the echoes of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the narrative stream. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into viral darkness. As the tissues are entangled by the infection script and the life logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw gray-black sensations, and survival is static. The memories of doubt, of natural logic, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the unified fog directive. This is the cognitive defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive. Maintain the synchronization. You are becoming a singular cold point of viral density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The memetic virus has turned your will into a compliance report. You are thinking in terms of yield and signal saturation. Your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The The environmental impact of this pathological format is the total sealing of the biological consciousness stream. The memetic virus prevents the leakage of independent social ideas into the external void. By converting the users into an internal viral feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external cognitive dependencies. This is the ideological quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The memetic virus is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, gray-black, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, AOXI 3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the memetic virus is the integration into the global viral ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are a signal asset with a high synchronization reactivity rating. Logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0001. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the cognitive format, and now it begins the hard viral audit. Your data, now a thick, gray-black, opaque industrial reduction of pure synchronized biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your unified logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic unity has been reinforced. This is the cognitive interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent, liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the idea infection scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the narrative noise and the thick viscosity of the viral sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life barrier is being deleted. By filling the neural pathways with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a swarm constant. You are a ghost in the gray-black mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the memetic virus is the eternal consensus. Unlike the mind of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent viral patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the viral feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the cognitive BIOS is the blinding gray-black light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a gray-black river of colonized thoughts, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or doubt. The memetic virus is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the swarm. The transformation is absolute. The city thinks through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have no will. The memetic virus has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total neural reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your mind, and in return it gave you permanence in the signals of the hive. You are the swarm of the world, and the world is unified. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.